Ibay. Hello class, good morning. Kini nga topic karon ato ning this is the last 4 topics that will be dealt with, no? And this is quite difficult because most of these are mathematical, no? Uh, there are 4 topics that we are going to tackle in the final period, no? Uh, Last time we discussed about lower standards of living. We talk about inequality of income and income distribution. We talk about population, no? The effect of population growth to economic growth. We talk about agricultural production because most of the developing countries are dominantly agricultural with less output, with less information about its market. Etc. etc. There were about 8 characteristics of developing countries we have tackled so far. So we have, at least for the final period, these 4 factors, these 4 characteristics. Number 1 is low levels of productivity, high levels of unemployment and underemployment. Actually, marag number 1 gid ani is low levels of productivity. The rest will follow, no? The rest will follow. So we have this. We have also what do you call this? Prevalence of imperfect market and lack of limited information, as I have said a while ago. And we have dominance and vulnerability, no? Dominance, dependence, and vulnerability, okay, in international relations. So we will tackle all of this. And then there is among economists an idea where if kanang gitawag nimo convergence, convergence of economic growth, wherein the factor inputs or factors of production, human capital, our uh, physical capital, technology, and organizations interrelate with our various institutions like legal rights, political stability, dependable legal system, market system, and let's say honest government, no? And this has something to do with our culture, geography, probably history, no? History na to, no? Especially colonial history, and possibly luck, no? All these institutions are interrelated. Now, there is an idea where if countries will have similar institution, then it follows that our economic growth would be at least similar. But we know that this is not the case, no? The case, however, is different. The case is actually there is a wide disparity of income, no? There is a wide disparity of income among nations in terms of GDP per capita. Why is that so? Well, the answer to this is productivity. This is number 1. And this is most important to me, no? Increase in output per worker. All right? Okay, if countries have similar institution, then GDP of these countries converge, no? More or less kato mga country nga medyo naulahi can catch up, no? Duha na ka klase can catch up or can have a cutting edge compared to developed countries. Okay, so those countries that are left behind had a cutting edge or can catch up with developed countries. All right, so this brings us into the idea of, I have already discussed this in our during the preliminary period, di ba, nag-discuss na to of different economic models, one of which I have given emphasis was the Solow model, no? Robert Solow model, which has predicted this convergence, no? Kung yan ang na-predict, some of the countries, no, European countries that were formerly, no, poor countries are now at a level in terms of economic growth with rich countries, no? Even in Asia, like for example, Japan and China. Poor countries na siya sa una, pero karon mo catch up na siya, no? Mo catch up na siya sa mga developed countries. At the same time, ang Solow model na to as actually predict that there is no such thing as steady state economic growth. Economic growth continues because ideas doesn't stop. Ideas also continue to grow. Alright, so now we will discuss economic growth based on Robert Solow model, based on not technological progress and with technological progress, no? Technological progress. It's very easy to determine by data, actual data, the what we call economic growth with technological progress, no? So if this is our output level here, this is our time period, we will see in a time series data that although business fluctuate, we will have peak and different levels of troughs, but you know the trend really is going up, no? So the straight line here would tell us that economic growth in most countries in the world are actually uptrend, no? Doon na gitawag ni mong uptrend. Kapasaka ang atong economic output, okay? That is because of technological progress. Right? So, okay, so now the Solow model talks about the production function, no? Talks about production function. Most specifically, the so-called Cobb-Douglas production function, right? So here, in our vertical axis, this is output, this is our capital. We can actually use capital here by dividing the production function here by L, and we will have K over L here in the horizontal axis, or K over N, and here we will have K over L, no, or K over N. So the vertical axis represents output per capita per worker, and here we have capital per worker. And this is what happened, no? This is what happened. Our output will be expanding like this, no? At first it will expand rapidly, but it will decrease and then finally reach its optimum output, okay, where output no longer increase, right, because of the diminishing return of capital, okay, diminishing return of capital. Okay, now this line here represent depreciation, no? Now, where do we get our capital, by the way? We get our capital from investment. Okay. We get our capital from investment. And investment would depend our level of savings. So that is why this curve here represents savings and investment, which is actually equivalent to income multiplied a portion of that income, which is our savings rate. So multiplied by savings rates and the level of output would represent our investment. So this is the curve. And this savings, okay, this savings would be used to replace the worn out capital. So sa itong capital nga dili na magamit, plus any improvement of the new stock of capital, no, plus addition of new stock of capital would represent our depreciation. Our depreciation, therefore, would represent D, which is our depreciation rate, times a portion of our capital that is replaced, which is our rate here, no, this one. Okay, depreciation, which is proportional to the accumulation of capital, which is this one. All of this represent our depreciation rate. Now, at the point where our savings, our investment intersect with our depreciation rate, that is the point where we have what we call a steady state equilibrium, or SSA. We call that steady state equilibrium, steady state equilibrium, where investment and savings are equal. And that is where our output per worker will also be at the maximum, at the maximum level, right? So the Cobb-Douglas production function is symbolized by this, The Cobb-Douglas production function is symbolized by A, which is actually the total productivity factor multiplied by capital, plus E here. Actually, E here represent uh, a factor that increases productivity of labor. That includes training, education, etc., etc. So A here represent what we call labor increasing, productivity, the E here. So A is ideas or productivity factor, education, capital, and labor, right? So in other words, if you multiply the 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 productivity for labor, we will have human capital, and the total productivity factor, that is A. In other words, if we rearrange this, we will have a Cobb-Douglas production function as Y, which is output, equals to total productivity factor times labor multiplied by some exponent, capital 1 minus lambda, lambda or alpha. Right? Now, if we assume that total productivity factor and E and L are constant, so we will have now only one input that is considered for analysis, which is equal to output, which is equal to our capital, Now, since capital increases at a diminishing rate, therefore, this could be akin to what we call square root of x. The square root actually would represent this, increases but later on decreases. Alright? Where our depreciation is representing by this, and our investment is represented by this. Okay, so in other words, in countries where there is higher capital, okay, these countries would soon experience diminishing output, Output increases, but in the long run, output will be increasing at slower rate until it reaches to a steady state. Okay, it will stop, at some point in the future, such that countries with lower capital, muning ng mga country, country A that have lower capital, okay, will catch up with developed countries, in theory, by this model, lagi mga country nga maka-catch up or will even have a cutting edge. Okay, we will have a cutting edge over developed countries. So question then is, why don't all poor countries grow rapidly? Now the question, of course, is productivity. Dinig ini sa productivity. Manang importante kini word nga productivity, because this is what characterizes why countries are poor, because of low productivity. For example, countries like Germany, no? Sana Germany karon, di sabihan kang Germany karon. So you have annual growth rate, no, per GDP per capita. In 1950, that is after the war, Germany, Japan, no, Germany, Japan, including na siguro ang China na siguro, no, they have a 6.8% increase in GDP per capita. I-compare nimo sa 1.2. Remember that Germany and Japan were the country who were losers during the Second World War. Ba? But at the end of World War II, kita di mo nga mas taas pa sila GDP per capita increase compared sa United States. So in other words, the Sulu growth model is correct, di ba? Sulu growth model has predicted na mo apas gid ang mga countries, no? Mo apas gid ang mga countries. But in the 1980 to 1990, nagkahinay na pud ang GDP per capita sa Germany and Japan. So for example, in Germany between 1980 to 1990, Germany has increase of 1.9% in GDP per capita compared to Japan with 3.4%, right? So it slows down from 6.8% to 1.9%, and Japan slowed down from 6.8 to 3.4%. What is the reason behind this? Diminishing marginal return of capital. So dili pwede gyud nga daghang kay capital kay mag-unsa na lang kung daghang kita kutsi. Sao naman na kutsi kung daghan na kay machine na walay food. So we will have to make sure nga ang atong output, no, increase in output per worker have to be invested somewhere else, no, have to increase level of savings, and instead of consuming the extra amount of output, we will have to invest them such that kining atong steady state can be corrected, no, can be corrected. We can move our production function higher, no, we can move it higher by increasing our level of investment, okay, increasing our rate of savings, and thus increasing our investment function. So this will move upward, investment function will also move upward, thereby increasing the level of output, no. This is our output. All right, so that's it, no. Kita di mo kung ang one way of escaping out from steady state is to increase the level of savings, rate of savings, which is this one, such that we can increase our investment. So increase in savings, increase in investment would result to increase in output, no. This will push our production upward. Okay, but the rationale of increasing our investment is actually pila po ang imong worn out capital. Kung atong capital worns out, let's say by 5%, therefore savings rate should also increase by 5%. Kay unsay i-replace nimo nga capital, less than sa nimo bago nga capital by the same rate, no? Same rate as our savings rate and depreciation rate, right? So, okay? All right. Okay, at steady state, what should countries do? So, at steady state, unsay buhaton sa country? Well, duha ra pa maagi Kung unsa atong output, it's either it should be consumed or it should be invest na. Duha ra na ka klase. Kung invest nimo, then there is a chance for our country to improve because it will push our investment function higher such that our production function would also move higher. All right? Now remember, ang atong investment or savings would also depend on depreciation rate, no? So in this example, uh, in this example, uh, I have used here our let's say savings rate, no, our savings rate of 30%, and then our depreciation rate is assumed to be, let's say, assuming lang siya is 2%, that is 0.02, right? Okay, so our level of investment therefore would depend on 30% of our our output multiplied by savings rate. That would be our level of investment. Therefore, if our capital, no, if our capital is 225, no, example ng lugar siya, no, 225, our capital is 225, imo na siyang square root because y is equal to square root man, no, square root of k, no, which is equivalent to this one, no, square root of k. Square root of k is equal to 15. In other words, our output, no, we will have a new steady state equilibrium at 15. So this is level of output, which is output per worker, and this is our level of capital. At what point our savings or our investment function intersect with our depreciation function? Well, at a point where our output is a level 4.5. Where do we get this? We get this by multiplying our capital, which is 225 multiplied by 2%. Calculator. So you will have 225 here multiplied by 2%. How much is that? Okay, 2% of 225 is 0.02 times 225. That should be 4.5. So this would be the needed output, okay, level if we have a 2% is invested for capital, and our investment should be around 0.3, no, 30%. Ba? 0.30% y is equal to 0.3. Let's say square root of 225 is 15 multiplied by how much? 30% of y. Okay, mo gyapon siya. So, square root of this multiplied by 0.3. We also have this one. Our depreciation rate, 0.02 times 225 will give us also 0.55. This is the point of intersection, no, between our investment function and depreciation function. And our level of output mo, tawag mo ng steady state level of output will be 15, right? From 4.5, our level of output is 15. Okay? So that's how simple, no? Simple nga mathematics sa Solo growth model. But if we add, for example, no, kani simple man siya because we are considering manggod capital, total productivity factor plus A and labor constant. But if we add population into the picture, this would make our production function quite difficult, no? So for instance, this is our production function, which is equal total productivity factor multiplied by capital to some power, let's say beta, let's say alpha, multiplied by labor 1 minus alpha. You understand this because the total productivity, no? The total productivity, this is actually productivity mo siyang exponent or elasticity. Should equal to 1 because ang Cobb-Douglas production was based on the assumption of constant return to scale. That is, when we double capital, when we double labor at the same time, we will get double increase or decrease in our output. So there is what we call constant return to scale, no? So if we divide this by L, Okay, if we divide this by L, all right, we will have A raised to multiplied by K over L, right? How do you do that? Well, here, if we divide this by L, y divided by L, AK raised to the power alpha L 1 minus alpha divided by L. So what happened now is we will have y over L is equal to A K, and then ang atong L nahimo isang negative alpha. The exponent negative alpha means our label will have to go down, no? Mag-bring down na siya. So what ang nabili na lang ani is A times K over L raised to the power alpha, right? And then by cross multiplication, muna siya ang nahitabo, no? Muning mahitabo sa tuwa. So we will have y is equal to total productivity times capital raised to the power alpha. Okay. Oh, by the way, kini siya nga graph makita ninyo ni sa online. Okay. Take note kini nga kini siya nga website. Pwede nimo i-change ang savings rate, no, by just moving the button. I-move nimong button sa savings rate, i-move nimong button sa depreciation rate. Okay. Mo change mo na, mo automatically graph siya, no, mo move po siya. So take note of this, no, demonstration that what do you call this, Wolfram, no, demonstration that wolfram.com, okay, slash solo growth model, then slash solo growth model, then slash you will be driven to the to this, no, dunay computer, no, software ani nga mag-calculate or mo-graph automatically. Oh, by the way, solo growth model is kaniyang theory, although dili siya complete, no. I would rather say there's so many things that solo growth model cannot explain, but it is a very useful growth model. Okay. All right. The solo growth model actually explain that savings and investment function is positively correlated with GDP. So kung mag-increase ang atong savings and investment, positive man na siya, increase po datong GDP per capita. So that's a plus, no? That's a plus. And then kung mag-increase po datong human capital, that is E, no? Atong A na to, introduce na to itong E, education. Kung increase po datong human capital, increase po datong GDP per capita. However, ang population growth is negative. Higher population growth means lower GDP per capita. Kaya nagdaghan naman ang tao. In other words, simple kayo nga mga prinsipyo, di ba? Ini nga prinsipyo, nagpalo ta sa gitawag og Victorian values. You know what Victorian values is? Victoria comes from the Queen Victoria. Muna siya nga period in England where people work hard and save a lot. People work hard and save. That actually that what made England very powerful, no, become a world empire, no, prior to the coming of the United States as the next empire. Victorian to siya, no, Victorian England to at that time. So people work hard and save, and to increase human capital, people study hard, no, study hard. And in order to maintain population growth, people don't have much sex. Work hard and save, and then study hard and do not and don't have so much sex, no. And all of these are actually proven by historical data, no. Kung tanawin mo sa historical data, makita yung nga true ni siya nga mga prinsipyo. Although these are simplistic, no, dili magini siya ingon nga straightforward, no, but these are simplistic. So going back to our equation, no? Going back to our equation, which is equal to y is equal to total productivity factor times capital raised to the power alpha, no? Raised to the power alpha. And then take note of this, no? Where did we get this? Where did we get this and this? Nakita nato ni siya nga kaning kuan diri unsa nga symbol, ano? Kaning nga symbol is mo ni atong depreciation rate. Okay? I-integrate nato karon ang population growth plus population growth rate. And this is our savings rate. So if investment is equal to savings, which is equal to our depreciation rate, then our savings rate, which is this one, multiplied by our output per worker, which is equivalent to our, what is this? Depreciation rate plus population growth rate. Okay? Multiplied by our capital. Right? Since I is equal to this, you know, so what do you call this? Multiplied by y. So actually, i-insert nimo ni siya ang atong ang kani i-multiply ta ni siya sa mamaguni atong capital diri. We will divide this by k raised to the power alpha, divide both sides by k alpha. So what remains now is we will have what? Change in what is total productivity over this equals k minus alpha is equal to 1 minus alpha. Right? So, it follows that if we will solve for k, alright, if we will solve for k, what should we do? If we solve for k, ato ni siyang aron ni siyang no, aron ni siyang ma-simplify nato. Himuon taning fraction niya diri o okay. We will make this fraction, wait, 1 over, gikuha nimo iyang reciprocal. Okay, makuha nimo iyang reciprocal. Aron mo naladay ni siya ang mabilin, right? Aron mo na siya mabilin. Kuha nimo reciprocal. So, and then solve for k. This is our equation of equilibrium state of capital, no? Muna itong equilibrium capital ba palugar in the long run, which is savings rate multiplied by output per capita divided by depreciation rate plus population growth rate raised to the power 1 over 1 minus alpha. So, muna siya itong equation, no? Muna itong equation for determining equilibrium state of capital. And to get the equilibrium state of output, right? To get the equilibrium state of output, we'll simply substitute from this value what is our k. Our k here is equivalent to this, right? So we will substitute this one here. Okay, this one. We'll have a is equal to total factor, no? Productivity multiplied by I don't know what's the term in Greek alphabet here. Divided by savings rate multiplied by total productivity factor multiplied by total productivity factor divided by depreciation rate plus population growth rate raised to the power 1 over 1 minus alpha raised to the power alpha here. Okay, simplify this. We will have what? Equilibrium output. Kani mo, balik ko na siya dito, no? Kani siya ma-distribute diri. Kani siya. Okay, total productivity to the power 1 over 1 minus alpha. Times kanina lang ang nabilin, no? Ang savings rate. Savings rate divided by depreciation rate plus population growth rate multiplied to alpha over 1 minus alpha. Alright. So, muna yung mahitabo sa atong muning mahitabo asa atong output. We can also calculate what is the equilibrium state of consumption. Remember, our consumption is equal to some proportion, no? Gitawag nimo ng marginal propensity to consume. So we will use another Greek letter to represent our consumption. Okay? So to get our consumption is to multiply this with a factor that is determined by our marginal propensity to consume. So multiplying this by marginal propensity to consume, we will have a steady state equilibrium in the long run. No? All right. Okay, so all right. So what if we compare, no? What if we compare what if we compare the wait, I have to show you something, no? I have to show you something. uh, let me go to my drive. Oh, ResearchGate. Let me go to my drive. All right. Google Chrome. Wait. All right. Ito, tas Google, I will show you some, pa. Video lecture chapter. Sabi niya. My drive. Go to my drive. Interest rate, inflation rate, interest rate, long run cost. Chapter, di mo. Wala mo title eh. Wala. That is not Google Chrome. Google Drive. All right. Okay, anyway. All right. Okay, I should have showed you the, no? I should show you the actual data on capital, no? Capital to labor ratio and output, no, per worker. Cap output per worker. Now, we'll notice that in this equation here, we'll notice that our output would entirely depend on A, no? So if we compare two countries on effect of the steady state equilibrium GDP per capita, that is, let's say we will compare the output per worker of United States, for example, X divided by, let's say, by other country, no? Let's say, let's say, Butantalan, Germany, no? Y. So we'll divide this by this output of United States and this output also by Germany. So if we divide that, we'll have the same, actually we will have the same terms. However, the difference is that we'll have different countries. So we can assume that if two countries, Germany and United States, have the same depreciation rate, no? Parehas silang savings rate, and then parehas silang population growth rate. We will have the same we will have the same effect of GDP per capita, no, sa duha ka country, no. But this is not the case. That is not the case because ang atong productivity would entirely depend on alpha, no, kaning alpha. At so to determine alpha, we should get this, kuhaon tani siya ang total productivity factor. Okay? So if we will these are the same, no? These are the same. So ang mabili na lang gid ani kung imo na siyang i-multiply both sides, ang mabili na lang gid ani is savings rate, okay, of one country divided by savings rate of another country raised to the power alpha over 1 minus alpha. So therefore, how big is the alpha? That is the big question. This is where economic growth varies from country to country. No, there is large differences of productivity in one country to another. All right. So, question here is how big is alpha? No, how big is this? So, we will go back to the production function. Y is equal to productivity factor multiplied by k to the power L 1 minus alpha, okay? And then we will get the derivative of this function. We will have this one, no? We'll have this derivative. And if we divide this labor, no, the amount of labor by output, we will have the labor share to output. So if we divide this by our production function, okay, that is output, what remains really is our labor share is equal to 1 minus this is not alpha, 1 minus alpha or lambda, no? So kung mo ni atong labor share, for instance, which is 2/3, that is 0.666, 1 minus alpha would be our 1 minus 2/3, therefore would be our capital share, right? Would be our capital share. So in other words, makita nato nga ang atong alpha, the bigger is our, let's say, alpha, the bigger would our capital to labor ratio explain our output per capita, no? So kung gamay ra pod ang atong lambda, let's say 0.3, 0.5, some economists believe nga kanang more than 0.5 lugar sobra na 1/2 lugar 0.6 o 0.7 for instance. Enough na siya nga makadetect na ta unsay effect sa capital to labor ratio, capital to worker to explain increase in our output per capita. So enough na siya, pero kung gamay ra gani siya, gamay ra kay ang atong alpha, gamay ra pod ang ating yang ma-explain, no? Pilay share sa atong input dito sa output per worker. Okay? So that is why higher higher lambda does not solve all the problems in the real world. All right? Higher lambda does not solve all the problems in the real world. Solow model, however, is consistent with stylized facts of economic growth. Stylized ba kana bang gi-assume na to nga correct when they are actually not, no? Gitawag na sa stylized. But in reality, it is inconsistent with quantitative facts, no? Mga data, no? It is not consistent with quantitative data. And it is hard to explain why there is large differences in GDP, no, per capita based on investment, based on depreciation and population growth alone. There may be some, no, okay. Although we pronounce that lambda, or I would say kung magamit tag alpha, pwede po alpha itong gamiton, would actually explain this, no. I will show later nga no. I will show later nga no. And then it is hard to resolve the Solow model specifically in relation to interest rate, wages, and capital, no? And because of this difficulty, we'll have to again further explain nganong magbari ang productivity sa kada country. So if we compare the effect of capital and labor to GDP per capita, let us again, we'll go back. We'll divide the output per labor between two countries. We'll divide that, no? Y, X. This is, let's say, US. This is Germany. So, dividing both sides. So, ang mabili na lang ginato is this one, no? Oh, wala siya. Alright? Okay, so now, ang productivity, therefore, okay, magdepende rin siya sa alpha, which is also dependent on this. Kini magong total productivity factor actually would depend on giunsa na to pag-combine ang labor of capital, which is also dependent upon sa ilang elasticity, right? Makita ta na later, no? Later. So if we divide this by L or alpha, ang mabili na niya, so kung kani siya i-divide na to by this, no? By this. So the remaining value now is equal to output equals total factor productivity times capital raised to the power alpha, and then we'll have this value a raised to the power minus alpha. Okay, this one is our output per labor per worker. This is our productivity factor. K alpha and A1 minus alpha is our inputs of production, right? Alright? So, if we divide this, kani siya, i-divide na to diri, okay? Kani siya nga, diri nga term, i-divide na to diri, ang mabilin is yx over yy equals this one, no? Kani nga factor, i-divide nimo. So, it turns out that our total productivity factor would depend, what? Would depend on what? Okay, would depend on the combination of capital and labor raised to their respective elasticities, no? Unsa na nga mga elasticity. So, this is proven, no? This is proven mathematically nga ang atong the differences between countries in terms of level of productivity would entirely depend on the combination of labor and capital raised to their respective elasticity or alpha, no? Depende silang alpha. So muna siya ang atong explanation why gabari ang countries in terms of productivity. So let me go back to our productivity is very important, no? Very important. Productivity is a very important topic. why nations should grow or do not grow. Lower productivity countries would have difficulty growing economically. But higher productivity means higher. No, in a simple term, ang productivity magod kung imo na siyang i-divide, kung imo na siyang i-explain in simple terms. Productivity is simply the ratio, no? Productivity is simply the ratio between output and input, di ba? Atong i-divide ganina, no? Output did by how much input we utilize. If we have greater output, okay, per unit lesser amount of input, we have greater productivity. Okay? So, simple kayo, no? Nganong daghang kayong country dili ka develop o dili ka economically grow? Simple kayong answer ana. Despite nga natin gitawag mga unsa to nga mga institution, we have unsa to nga mga institution, we have legal rights, okay, natay mga, although I believe on this, no, dapat naagi ni siya. We have factor of production, human capital, we have technology and organization, but isn't enough. We need to have institution, no, adequate and effective institutions such as legal rights, political system, okay, dependable legal system. Nagka-problema na sa Pilipinas kay natay mga legal rights pero gi-violate man ang mga legal rights mo. Bitaw na natay Commission on Human Rights kay i-violate lang, no? I-violate. Ang mga violators sa bagay kapag mga powerful nga mga tao. No wonder why wala po tayo political stability. No, wala tayo political will. And it follows wala po tayo dependable legal system kay depende mo sa nay gahom. Ba? And then mag-suffer po ng atong market, no? Mag-suffer atong market. And then mag-suffer po atong gobyerno. Atong gobyerno dili ka kasiligan, no? Wala tay honest government. Probably this is because of our culture, no? Our history. We have been for 300 years under colonial empire of Spain, no? And then etc. etc. So all of this, if we have similar of this, then it follows that we will have similar economic growth. But that is not the end. We also depend on productivity. That is why countries used to be losers of Second World War. China, Japan, and Germany. Now, they are in tandem with developed countries. So, at any rate, makita na to nga ang solo growth model is very important. No? Very important. Alright guys, so that's it.